Well, this week I thought we would make the dolls a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with a bonus jar of peanut butter to go along with it. Stay tuned and see how fun and easy this project is. All right, so the first step in making our sandwich is we need 2 slices of bread. I'm going to pull my cane out, and I'm cutting my cane now on a piece of white paper because I don't want to transfer the chalk from the edges of the loaf of bread onto the surfaces. And I'm having the same problem with this loaf of bread, this cane, that I have with a real loaf of bread. I can't cut straight. Oh well. Put this over to the side where it's in a safe place. Get this out of my way. Now, we're going to start out just like we did for the toast, just like we do for a lot of things. I have a clean piece of sandpaper here. And I'm going to put my bread like this. And I'm going to texture it. And this is pretty much the same texturing we've done for the slice of bread that we did a while back, and for the toast. And we'll do this in the future too, although some sandwiches I'm going to show you in the future we actually won't be giving this much texture to. But we do, unlike the toast, we need to make sure we don't carry the brown color onto the face of our bread. Oh, I think this is starting to stick, so I'm going to dip my wire brush into a bit of cornstarch. That way it won't stick as much. That's better. I probably should take this brush to the sink and wash it when I'm done this week. Now the toothbrush, which I just had in my hand, there it is. Now, if I was positive I could keep track of which side was which, I wouldn't bother turning them over and texturing the other side. But I want to make sure I don't lose track, so I'm going to texture both sides. Texturing the inside, this side is totally optional if you can keep track. You can see I use this wire brush a lot. Now I'm going to turn this back over, just so I can kind of use that sandpaper to even out that texture on that second side. Now, I want to stack these up and cut them, because we're going to bake our bread slices before we make the sandwich, but we want to make sure that it looks like we made the sandwich and then cut it. Oh my God. Now, very carefully peel them back apart. There. And now, just like we did with our toast, we're going to take 2 emery boards. And it really is easier, especially if you're just learning, to use the emery board on the top and the bottom. And I like to do it on the video. When I'm not doing a video, a lot of times I will only use one. But on the video, it's a little easier. One less thing to worry about. And what we're doing here with this little motion. We're just barely, almost like we're tickling the surface. I'm not pushing in hard, just enough to tickle, kind of like I do here, where it's not really, it's barely scratching. And we're just bringing up some texture. We're just barely. It's amazing how much texture that gives. And every once in a while I wipe the tip of my pointy tool off on my hand, because if I have that big ball of clay on the end, I'm not going to get as good a detail. There. I'm going to do these other two parts of slices. Then I'm going to bake these pieces of clay at about 250 to 275 for about 10 minutes. And when they're baked and cooled, I'll come back and we'll work on the fillings. Alright, so our pieces of bread are now baked off, so they're nice and firm. They've cooled all the way. In fact, I baked these yesterday, so they've had overnight to get solid. It's okay that they're a little warped. We're going to fill it with peanut butter and jelly. Excuse me, I keep coughing today, I'm not sure why. So those, and they were baked right on the sandpaper. So I've pre-mixed some clay, and I had to play with my percentages. And this will be listed in the blog post, but it's 1 part sunflower yellow Fimo and 6 parts Sculpey tan. I just wanted to get something that looked kind of peanut butter-like. So I'm going to take a little bit of this. I'm going to work on a small ceramic tile. I think I'll just use, probably not all. Yeah, probably most of that. And I have some translucent liquid Sculpey. We also call it TLS. And I am going to mix that right with this clay. And let's see, here's something to mix with. That's not going to work. That is going to break. So let's find a clean double pointed knitting needle, and you just kind of work back and forth. Kind of mush this together. And as it gets mixed, it will turn into a paste. If you have a metal palette knife, that works really well. I don't know where mine went. I used to have one and I lost it. So we're just going to mix this together. Put a little more liquid Sculpey in there, a little more TLS. I'm at the bottom of my bottle. I'm trying to get all of this used. I don't like to waste any of it. So mine's gotten a little thick over time. And I've got a new bottle of it, but I want to use that one up all the way first. If you work longer, you can make this look more like smooth peanut butter. If you work a shorter time, it'll look more like chunky. So I think I'm going to turn the camera off, and I'm going to get this kneaded through until it's a lot smoother than what I can get on camera. I'll be back in just a second. Alright, that didn't take as long as I thought it would. I got myself a wider stick to use. That helped a lot. So we are going to spread this on to our sandwich. And you want to be fairly generous with this. And it's okay if it comes out. You want it to kind of, we want to ooze it out of the sandwich too. All the way to that cut edge, because remember, we want it to look like we'd made a whole sandwich and cut it in half. But if we would have tried to do this before we pre-baked the bread slices, we would have made them, they would have gotten all out of shape getting this done. Okay. And yeah, I want some little bits sticking out there. I did not want to do that, however. Come on. It is very sticky. It's sticking to my fingers. All right. The other half of the bread. And we're just spreading this out. And the idea is we want to get this all the way, especially to the center edge, and a little bit coming out. You know, when you cut a sandwich, it kind of oozes out. All right, let's get these out of the way now without tipping them upside down, hopefully. I'm going to grab a wet wipe. I should have grabbed a wet wipe before I started. Now let's make some jelly. Now you could use TLS for that also. I actually prefer to do like we did last week. I'm going to wipe this off first. Get that so I can use it again. I like using the liquid Kato clay, so that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to make grape. So I've got the same exact oil paints we had last week when we made the jelly on the toast. The Rose Madder and the Cerulean Blue. And my son's cat has decided he's got to come in and talk to me. That's okay. So we're going to mix this together. And get a nice pretty, see, I think I want a little more red in that. Mix your purple before you add the liquid clay to it. That's better. Now, a little pool of liquid Kato clay. And we mix. And this will not be as light as it appears now when it bakes, because it doesn't matter if you get this in the middle of the, the middle of the bread. You want it along the edges of this piece of bread. Oops, there's got jelly all over the bottom of my bread. Now, making sure we've got our bread the same direction, which I think I do. I hope I do. Kind of squeeze it together. And let's get this over there. Now, let's clean up an area here so I got another clear area to put this. I really don't want to get this all over the bottom of my bread. So, toothpick. I'm going to have to mix just a little bit more. think I put too much jelly in the other half of our sandwich. Well, that's okay. And all this liquid clay will serve as a glue to hold our sandwich together. Okay, I think that's plenty. Wipe that off. Put our bread down on top. Squish it. Got a little more on the bottom than I want. To wipe some of that off. All right, I'm going to wipe the oil paint up, and I'm going to bake this at 275 degrees for about 20 minutes so I can make sure that that Kato clay is set up. And a good test of that is if this is firm, this pool here, then the stuff inside the sandwich will be ready to go also. So I'm going to clean up, I'm going to bake this off, and when it's baked and cooled, I'll be back. Alright, so these are baked and cooled, and what do you think, guys? We have peanut butter and grape jelly, and we've got a little bit of runoff there that kind of went under. It's easy enough. Take an X-Acto knife. You won't get it all off, but you'll get most of it. This way they'll lay flat on a plate for you. Had I been a little more careful with my jelly application, I wouldn't have gotten them underneath here. 20/20 hindsight, I really need a second tray so I could make these on one, move it to a second one to bake, and then bake this so that I can bake this off to get rid of it. But that is our peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So that's that part of our project. Let's move on to a little bonus. We're going to make a fake jar of peanut butter. Alright, so first I want to apologize for the line of light, but the sun is shining right at my window, and my mini blinds have that little, thing where the string goes through it, so it makes a little light spot. So we are going to make a jar of peanut butter. Now this is a little piece of PVC pipe. It's approximately it looks like it's about 1 3/8. I wanted anywhere from 1 1/4 to 1.5 inches tall. My son and I actually worked at this way too long to try to get this relatively straight. This was a chore. But it's not completely totally straight, it's almost straight. So we're just going to go with it. In the end, hopefully I can make it look straighter with the lid. So we are going to give this jar some shape, because I was looking at the peanut butter jar we have in the kitchen and also some online, and they're usually not a completely straight up and down jar. Now you can do that if you want, but I'm going to give this some dimension. So this is just a piece of quilling paper. You could just cut some light cardstock to about an 1/8 inch strip, but I had this, so I thought, yeah, I might as well use it. So put some glue, and I'm really liking this Elmer's Craft Bond quick dry glue. For a lot of things, I like it better than tacky glue lately. So we're going to see how much of a mess we can make here. I'm going to use my finger, and I've marked which side is the top. The top is actually the more crooked cut. So the more straight cut is the one I want for the bottom. And I don't bother to cover up those marks because we're going to cover this with a couple of coats of paint when we're all done. So I'm using my finger, and I'm bringing the glue up the back of the paper, and I'm trying to keep it pretty consistently covered in glue. You could probably use Mod Podge for this, tacky glue, pretty much anything. Trying to make not too much of a mess. And you'll notice I'm wiping away the excess glue. just a little more glue, I think. Let's get a little more glue out. All right, and that's about the kind of dimension I want. I should have gotten scissors out before I got glue all over myself. All right. I've got cat hair on my finger, and I dropped my quilling paper. Yeah, I don't cut any of this stuff out. You get all the crazy stuff in this video. All right, now I'm going to attempt to do another row of that up above, and I may have to go retrieve another piece of quilling paper, but I think you can figure out how I did this. So I'm going to go down, not all the way to the top. I want the bottom to have less space between the bump and the bottom than I have between the bump and the top. I hope that makes sense. Glue, and the two strips don't have to, you don't have to make your dimension the same, but this will give us a logical place to put a label for our peanut butter, and it just makes the jar look a little more interesting. Now you could go look for a wood piece to use for your jar. You can use anything you want. I looked for all kinds of different things, and this, I just couldn't find what I wanted, so I decided I'd do it this way. There. So now that glue all needs to dry. I'm wipe off my fingers, and I kind of wipe this up, and I'm going to let that dry. And when that's dry, I'll come back and we'll start painting this a peanut butter color. Alright, so my glue is dry. My paper's not perfectly straight, but yeah, we're just going to go with it. I looked through my paint stash, and I have a paint from Americana called Cocoa, and that was the closest to a peanut butter color I had. Ooh, gross noises. Put it out on my tile so I can scrape up anything that's left. And you're going to get paint on your fingers. And by the way, I don't even bother to clean off the markings on the pipe. Because we're going to put on a couple of coats of paint. Don't worry about getting paint on the top rim, because we're going to put a lid on this. Similar to what we did when we did the jam. Alright, we're going to let this dry. Come off my finger. Come on. It's just the right size to go on my finger and not want to come off. Alright, so I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to wash my paintbrush, and I'm going to put 2 or 3 coats on, trying to get my paint even and get a nice even color. And when that's done and dry, I'll be back. Alright, so we have, I think, 3 coats on here. So now it's time to make it look like it's coated in glass. And again, we are going to use the triple thick, just like we did on the jelly jars a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to put a little bit out on my tray. And I would rather have a softer brush, but I couldn't find my brush I wanted, so I'm just using the same one I've been using. And we're going to put a couple of coats on. Not too thick, because you don't want it to run or to show your brush marks. And that's a big danger with this brush, because this brush is kind of stiff. So I want to minimize brush marks, and I want to get a nice coat, a nice even coat. Now I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to take care of my paintbrush, and I'll put on, I'm thinking at least 3 coats, maybe more. When those are on and dry, I'll come back and we'll go to the next step. Alright, so this has about 3 or 4 coats on it. And we've got a couple more steps. We need to put a label on, we need to put a lid on. I decided I'm going to make my label next, so I can decide what color lid I want to put on this. So, and I don't know what all these hand motions are. You could make your label out of just plain like computer paper. I actually have a piece of, it's the bottom of a piece of sticker paper. This is like what you make address labels and stuff on, or mailing labels. I keep the extra pieces of this, and then I've got it for projects, and I thought that would just be easier today. So I'm going to design a label. I already measured. I have approximately 1/2 inch between these 2 ridges. So that's how wide I'm going to make my label. And I'm using Sharpie pens. I have ultra fine ones and I have regular ones here. And I'm just going to more or less doodle. I'm going to try not to stick my head under the camera, and I'm going to try and keep my paper under the camera. But we all know how that goes. So I think, and you'll have to excuse, my handwriting's not the best, and especially when I'm trying to write on camera, because it's hard. It's really hard to do that. So I want to make like a round area that's going to be white. So I'm just using a clay cutter, because I'm going to make my label wrap all the way around my jars. My jar. I don't have one here. Make that mark, and then I'm going to kind of fill this in. I'm using Sharpies because I know if I decide to coat this with a clear finish, it won't affect it. And also, my Sharpies are just sitting here, so I'm going to go, my label's going to go all the way around, so I am going to extend my color out. Let me just turn this way. I'm going to follow that line. Now I bet you guys can do a lot better job than me making your labels, so I want to see your labels. If I wasn't doing this on a video, I would probably have actually designed my label on my computer. But then you couldn't watch me struggle, so that would be no fun. Alright, I'm going to write the word. So I think I like that for the top side. I'm going to write the word creamy, if I can spell on camera. That's always embarrassing to misspell something on camera. Creamy, and let's write peanut butter. Let's write butter first, because that's a really long R. Whatever. There. Nothing fancy. So now I need my scissors, which of course I had left on my desk. Now I'm going to cut. I'm going to cut this hopefully long so that I will be able to cut off the extra. Just going to follow that line I drew. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We're not doing perfect here. If we wanted perfect, we'd do it all on the computer and we would design it in a graphics program. And quite frankly, if I was making a product to sell, I would do it that way. But this is just for fun. This is just for photos. Now, this stuff has a back. Like I said, you could do your label out of regular paper, just like we did with the jelly jars, and just glue them on. Let's see. I like this for my front because it's a little straighter. Oops. Cut off the extra. I did discover the Sharpie pen I used to mark where to cut did come through the paint, so I cut that a little too short. That's okay. It can be like that in the back. There. Now I need to go find a piece of paper to make the lid with. So I'm going to go look through my stash of paper for that, and then I'll be right back. Alright, so I found some red paper. I think that'll look pretty. It'll emphasize the fact I messed up the word creamy. That's okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut a strip that is a 1/4 inch wide. And normally I would use my paper cutter, but my paper cutter is clear out in the other room. So I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. And hopefully I can cut a straight strip. Now I need a circle for the top. Do I have my... And of course my round scissors are not here, so I will be cutting it without the round scissors. So, yeah, a 1-inch circle will do, because we want a circle that is a little bigger. Is that enough bigger, actually? Let's go to 1 1/8. I know if I do 1 1/8 that will be plenty big, because I want this to come down on the sides of my bottle just a little bit. It makes a much better looking lid if it does. I don't know where I put my curved scissors. The mess my table's in, they very well could be on my table somewhere. Alright, so I am going to, because it's a little bit, let's see if I can get this to bend down. So before I put glue on, I'm going to start kind of just bending that down. Now you could use Mod Podge or you can use glue, since this glue is right here. This is the glue we glued on the strips of paper with yesterday. And I'm also going to put a little bit of glue on that paper. Just around that edge that I bent down. Now, put this on. Try not to get glue down on the parts of your jar where it will show, because it will be a lot less shiny. So now I want this to dry before I do anything else. So I am going to let this dry. I'm going to actually set it upside down. Like that. So I'm going to set it upside down. That way if there's any glue drips, they won't drip down the sides of the jar. I'm going to let that glue dry. When the glue is dry, I'll be back and we'll add the strip to it. Alright, so this glue is dry on the top, so now our lid is not going to move, and I've got my 1/4 inch strip, and I'm making sure I put the glue on the side that had the pencil line, because I did not cut off all the pencil line. And I'm going to start at the back of this. I've got a wet wipe here so I can clean my finger off so I don't get glue on the jar where I don't want it. That, and I'm going to put just a drop of this. This white glue is the same white glue I've been using, and I'm using my little drop of super glue. And I'm going to stick this together, bring this around. Another drop of this. I think I've explained on this channel before, the reason I use the two glues is the white glue is what holds everything long term, but the super glue acts kind of like a clamp, It allows me to have this stay together. Just don't get it all over your fingers. Okay, cut this off. And put just another drop. I'm still kind of sort of under camera. And pull around, put that together. And once that is dry, our jar of peanut butter, put your lid just the way you want it before you walk away. Make sure it's the way you want it, and we are going to let that dry. Once that's dry, our project will be done. So I'm going to let this glue dry, and then I'll come back and we'll look at everything together. Alright, so I decided to add an additional step because I noticed I got some glue, of the glue seeped through or got onto this paper, and I want this to look more like plastic anyway. My glue's not quite dry, but it's fine to go on. So what I've got is I've just got some matte Mod Podge, and I'm just going to very carefully with a small soft brush, after I get the loose hair out of it, keeping my fingers completely clean, I am going to carefully brush this just on the lid, the red cardstock. And this paper I used was just a scrap of regular, like, card making cardstock. And this will kind of blend everything together too up here on the top. There. Okay, now we're going to let that dry. Then this will be finished and I can show you the completed project all together. Alright, so our peanut butter jar is all dried and ready to go. We've got our peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and of course I brought out the grape jelly jar from a couple of weeks ago. I can think of all kinds of cool scenes we could set up with the dolls with this little set. And this was so simple to make, don't you think? Be sure and check the blog post. I will have pictures and list other information there. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would love to have you do that. If you haven't found my Facebook page, come on over and like the Facebook page. A lot of times I'll give a sneak peek picture a couple of days early, sometimes a week early, of what the next project will be. There's other things that I show pictures of that never make it to the blog, and it's probably the fastest way to get a hold of me most weeks. So have fun with you dolls, and I'll talk to you next week.